Hi, I am Peter Bregman, and with me is Laura Vanderkam. The book that we're talking about is Off the Clock, Feel Less Busy While Getting More Done. And we're here just for a couple of minutes so that we can get a little bit of insight from Laura that we expand on in the Bregman Leadership Podcast. So Laura, first of all, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Now, one of the things that we've talked about, and one of the big challenges to being off the clock, and by off the clock, it's where time is spacious and that you're not, being pressured by productivity, is that there are maximizers and satisficers. That, when I'm a maximizer, I want to get everything possible done and be super productive. And when I'm satisficer, I could be good enough. Like good enough can be good enough in a sense. And that the challenge of being off the clock is the nagging maximizer perfectionist tendency that doesn't really go away, that every time, at least I'm off the clock, it's telling me you should really be back on the clock. You should really be back on the clock. You should really be back on the clock. And it makes it very, very hard to actually be off the clock. And I'm wondering if you have advice for other people who might be like me.
Yeah, so this maximizer satisficer dichotomy is based on the work of Barry Schwartz, who's a psychology professor who came up with this. Maximizers kind of want the best of everything. They want the absolute best. Satisficers, as you said, good enough is good enough. And it sounds like maximizing is a really awesome thing. I mean, like, who wouldn't want the best, right? My kids in karate class all say this mantra of like, we're on a quest to be the best, quitters never win, winners never quit, all this stuff. Right. And I'm thinking about this. I'm like, you know what? I settle all the time. I settle like crazy. Like, nobody's going to build a motivational speaking career saying I settle all the time, but it's true. It's how my life works. I'm a complete satisficer. I really do believe that good enough is good enough. And the reason this saves time is because then you're not prone to regret. Satisficers think when you have a certain set of criteria and you make a choice that meets it, then you're good. And it doesn't mean there isn't something better out there, but you hit your thing. So you're good. And so some of the ways I've learned that this saves time, for instance, if I'm having a business lunch with people, I've realized that it's always so awkward to be like studying the menu while I'm attempting to manage this early part of getting to know somebody. I'm like, yes, I'd like to talk with you, but let me study the menu here. But why am I studying the menu, right?
Okay, so I totally agree with you. And the question is, how do you manage the maximizer tendency in that moment? So I agree with you. It's much smarter to be a satisficer. But a lot of us really want to get it right and are going to struggle to get it right. And so we're going to push ourselves off of that. What are some techniques to prevent ourselves from getting seduced by the maximizer tendency?
Yeah. Well, in the restaurant like that, a good thing to tell yourself is this is not my last supper. Like, you are going to eat again. You will probably go to this restaurant again. It does not matter. You can just ask the waiter to bring you something that he or she thinks is good, or you can have a standing sort of thing you always get at places like a chicken secret Caesar salad or something that, a lot of restaurants tend to have. Another thing I think sort of broadly that helps with all this is related. And one is to tell yourself that most of this stuff just will not matter. It probably won't matter in a week, let alone a month or a year. And one way to convince yourself of this, and I challenge anyone listening to this to try this. What were you thinking about and what were you worried about on today's date 2 years ago?
I mean, I couldn't tell you entirely yesterday what I was worried about.
Yesterday what you were worried about. But, it's like 2 years ago, like maybe if you got married 2 years ago today, or, right, one of your kids was born or something, like you might have, had things related to that. But for most of us, we have absolutely no idea.
Great advice. So one of the ways to really settle down that maximizer tendency is to ask the question, ultimately in a couple of years, is this decision going to really matter? And if it's not, just make a decision and move on.
Yeah. And you could even look at past big decisions you have made and ask yourself, were there any fallout negative from the consequences of making this decision? And, even something like a house, like no house is perfect, right? You're probably going to make repairs. You're going to need to do renovations anywhere. There's some things you like. There's some things you don't. And if you're okay with that, life's good.
I love it. In fact, I can think of a challenge is to go to a restaurant and when you have two choices, try to make the wrong decision and see if that matters. And that actually could be kind of fun because then you really realize.
Yes.
We're talking with Laura Vanderkam. Her book is Off the Clock, Feel Less Busy While Getting More Done. And this is just a little taste of what you get if you come and listen to her full conversation at the Bregman Leadership Podcast. Laura, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.